So how do we protect against enumeration? Well, the more you cut back on the ability for people to enumerate, the more you are cutting back on the ability for normal users to find out what they need to know. Enumeration is a normal part of network operations. That would be like saying, we don't want people to attack our company, so don't make any information about our company available on the internet. Well, then nobody doing business with you can find you either. So the most we can do is just minimize the stuff they don't need to know. So for SNMP, for one thing, just don't use SNMP. Use something like Microsoft Operations Manager, which uses RPC instead. Use something proprietary, something that's encrypted. Or turn off the SNMP service and like I said, use an encrypted proprietary product. They too will have their issues. For sure, change the default community string, for sure. Don't let it be public and private. Upgrade to SNMP v3 if you can, because it will encrypt the passwords and the messages. However, I have to tell you this. Microsoft, by default, doesn't support the encrypted version. You would have to use a third-party tool. Have group policy, security policies saying additional restrictions for anonymous connections. Turn that on. Make sure that there are no null sessions, no null session pipes, null session shares, and IPsec filtering. Have all of that off as well. So make sure that that's restricted and you turn off the null sessions. In DNS, don't allow DNS zone transfers to unknown, untrusted hosts. Make sure that anything that's private, private addresses, private hosts, are not going to be published into a public DNS zone, a public DNS server. You can use like GoDaddy or your registration services to hide behind them. Don't use anything really sensitive information. Like when you put in a network administrator contacts, use like a role rather than a person to try to avoid social engineering. For SMTP and LDAP, configure SMTP to ignore messages to unknown recipients, to not include sensitive email server and localhost information in mail responses. Certainly don't allow open relays, which they should all have that off by default. For LDAP, make it SSL. Normal LDAP is clear text. I mean, all of these are clear text. Use the encrypted version if you can. So LDAP S, which is not 389, it's 636. And choose a different username from your email address and enable count lockout. Now, however, having your username be different from your email address goes totally against using Microsoft's Exchange. And if you're a Microsoft Exchange, you want the two to be the same because users will log on using their email address. So that only works in some cases. For SMB, just disable things like disable SMB on servers that don't need it. Like if it's a web server, a DNS server, if it's not doing file and print, turn off SMB. Turn it off on anything that's facing the internet or anything in the DMZ. Disable TCP 139 and 445. And don't allow anonymous access. So restrict null session access parameters in the Windows registry. Actually, don't go in the registry. Use the local security policy instead. So these are some of the things you can do. Now, of course, it means that you have to know what people need to access, and you need to talk with your network administrator and your server administrator to make sure that if certain things are turned off, it doesn't negatively impact normal business.